All right. Well, thanks everybody for being on. We can jump into it. I think, Cyrus, you know, I'm looking for your resume somewhere. You know, we're part of the COG. I don't know if you're familiar with our COG, but it sounds like you've done a lot of work down here.
A lot of work over 25 years, yes.
Yeah. So you know that it came up at COG meetings last year and this year that they want to look at hiring a lobbyist. And I presume it's to represent the 5 cities, the COG, with housing bills, but I'm not really sure. So we wanted to meet with you and kind of get a feel for what you think you could do for the COG. And
my pleasure.
Her input too.
So I had an exchange with Terry, and he said that's what he kind of let me know, that mainly this is interested in legislation, specifically housing legislation. And so,
but not exclusively. Not
exclusively, but legislation generally. And so when I hear that, BB&K is a large municipal firm, so we're always really watching, if not involved, in legislation related to municipal interests, including housing. So when you say that, I prepare a proposal that basically asks you to pay for kind of just the incremental additional amount of work I would be doing, because I'm already doing the work on legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already tracking, I'm already working on position papers for other people. I mean, I haven't worked specifically on a housing bill since about April. So, I don't have current information as of the last 2 weeks, and this is kind of a critical time, but it's not, you're not bringing me on to recreate the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
When you work on legislation. Now, if you were to want to sponsor a bill, that's far more demanding. If you were to have an interest in, say, expanding your name ID, perhaps within the administration or just generally in the public, that's also different. I have different service offerings based on what you tell me your interests are. What I've heard from Terry is you're interested in being involved in legislation, and that's the bread and butter of lobbying. So that's bringing you on, given that we're already a municipal firm, following these things. It's just not a huge lift for me to, take on your interest in this. Now, again, I have other clients who, there's a water district in Orange County. They don't have a lot of name ID. They care about things like public relations. They care about members of the legislature, identifying them as a source of information. So I do a lot of work for them that's just around building name ID. Well, that's a lot of time, and I charge them more. You guys don't, I find that municipalities don't really have that interest. You get name ID just when you announce who you are. I'm City of Agoura Hills. Okay, well, people understand you're a city in LA County, and you represent, okay, I don't really need to do a lot of work to explain who Agoura Hills is. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's why in the proposal that I prepared for Terry, I'm looking at, the assumption is you're asking me to work on legislation of the general nature to support and oppose legislation, give you analyses, give you advice on strategy, that kind of thing. If you were guys to bring me on and a year later I find out really what you're having me do is really involved with the administration a lot, you've got me in front of regulatory boards, I'm setting meetings with, department chairs or agency heads, well, then we'd want to probably next year talk about, okay, here's what you guys really want. Here's my typical service offering. So we change it. But so far what I'm hearing is you guys want a standard kind of lobbying agreement where I'm your eyes and ears and feet in Sacramento.
So let me ask you, do you have any clients that maybe would be contrary to our interests?
I'm not allowed to have clients contrary to your interests.
Okay, because I would seem like, so anybody that's the client of yours that's, doing the same thing we are and wants you involved in legislation is, trying to, be careful with these housing bills or kill the bills.
Hmm. So, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I do. I have a series of questions, but please respond to Illece before, I'll wait.
Certainly. Part of the process of bringing me on is we have to do a conflicts check. So I can't just agree with you right here, say, yes, I'll represent you. We're a law firm and we treat every client and we run a conflicts check. And so every client of BB&K, legal and otherwise, will see, okay, I'm taking on Virgenes-Malibu COG. Does anybody have any objections? Now, if anybody does, it's not the end of the story. because it could be they're working on litigation and I'm working on legislation.
Right.
But what we would do is we want to work with both parties and say, okay, you guys understand I'm doing this and you guys are both okay with it. You would, if there's a potential issue, you would both sign waivers saying, I understand I will not be involved in that litigation you don't like. And, you know, in other words, it's all worked out and I'm not allowed to have a conflict since I'm an attorney in the law
Right.
firm.
This seemed like such a big law firm that, yeah. Okay. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Hi, Cyrus. So I'm also a graduate of our mutual law school. I'm from Sacramento and I'm very familiar with your law firm. So, yes. So here's here's what I'm looking for. So, you know, we first on the short term, you know, the legislature has, you know, approximately 30 days left in this weird thing that they're doing. You know, now they're saying maybe they're going to do virtual, who knows? So the main thing that our COG cities are, you know, obviously concerned about is local control. Housing is a big part of that. That's not the only thing. You know, fire safety, how fire regions are related to housing. They are intimately related, evacuation, this kind of thing. And then, you know, probably a variety of miscellaneous other specific issues that really are not, they're not coming to mind right now since I don't know all the bills that are pending, all the, you know, hundreds of them. So on the short term, the legislative session's got about a month left, correct?
Correct.
So how effective can this be for us? Like if we were to say, okay, today, how effective can this be? I mean, it's my understanding that, you know, there aren't any really super bad housing bills coming through the process right now. Nothing to equate to like Senator Wiener's SB 50, which was like the nuclear bomb of housing legislation.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear your take on that.
Well, now he does have, SB 902, which has quite a few pieces of SB 50 in it.
Yeah.
And
Slightly,
this part where I just have to kind of do a disclaimer, since at this exact moment in time, this kind of 2-week period right here, if you're not personally involved on a bill, it's very possible you don't have current information. So like I'm personally involved in these 2 other water policy bills. If you were to go in the system, it would appear that they're still active and moving. In fact, I learned that the chair of the committee has already decided that these bills will not be set for a hearing. So they might appear to be live in the system, but they are in fact dead.
Okay.
So SB 902 was out there. According to the system, you know, it got a lot of bipartisan support. According to the system, it's still live. I don't know. It might be dead for all I know. I would have to get involved, you know, start making some phone calls, call the staff, call right now. But what I would do in the short term is very quickly reach out to your members, all the members that represent your areas. Now, they already know me, but they need to understand I'm now representing their COG. So so when I call them up, I'm calling on behalf of 5 cities, which by the way is wonderful for a lobbyist. I've represented another COG. It's just a great, it's good client for a lobbyist to have, because you get to call up and you get to say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of these 5 cities. You know what? You get your meetings, you get your callbacks. You guys are good clients. So first thing I would do in the immediate short term, were you to bring me on anytime soon, is very quickly, all the legislators that represent your area have to understand you've brought on a lobbyist and we're going to be active, because I need to start getting information from them. Then I would specifically go at those bills that I mentioned, 1902, and there's about 8 that appear to be still moving on.
1120, 902. I don't know. I've got them down somewhere. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I got a list. I got to find, you know, to engage, I have to personally talk to someone or get an email and say, yes, that bill's active, it's being set, or no, it's dead, let it go. So that would take about a week. But within about a week, we could get the word out that you've got a lobbyist and find out which bills are active. And then I would quickly give you an analysis of those bills, where's support and opposition, what are people are saying, and if you want to engage, here's how to do it, and here's the timeline. So that'd be short term. Now, between now and when the legislature comes back again, we'd want to do some work in the district where just, of course, right now we're doing Zoom meetings, but they're actually being pretty well received. We'd be doing Zoom meetings with your representatives and key staff. Just if we want to be involved, call us, think of us, FYI.
Okay.
Now, if you guys ever want to do something really big, so, you know, I'm BB&K, we have about 5 lobbyists. You know, I'm the main person on state lobbying, and I'm the only person who presents in committees, and my name goes on all the letters, but I have other people who help, they're lobbyists. But let's just say hypothetically, you wanted to do something really big. A big bill comes down and you want to be the main player, you want to sponsor a bill, and I think it's above my league. I think this requires a powerhouse firm to pull this off. What I've done in the past is I become like a contractor for you. So if it's worth that much to you and you want to pull the money together, like for example, last project I did was 2 years ago. A group of internet businesses really didn't like a privacy bill. It was moving. Amazon had cut a deal and gotten out, so there was no big opposition remaining. It appeared to be sailing through. They pulled together $100,000, and I used the majority of it to go out and contract with one of 2 firms that I have a great relationship with, big name firms, and we came in like the Roman army, you know, and killed a major bill. But if it's something above me, I come to you and I say, okay, here's your situation. Here's what I think it would cost if you want to be involved to have an impact on that scale. But whatever it is, I can shape a service offering for you that fits what your desires are. Then it's up to you to decide if it's worth that much money to you.
So Cyrus, do you work with the League of Cities? I assume you do, yes?
Oh yeah, we not only work with them, BB&K provides a lot of when you see an analysis come from the league, very often it's actually a BB&K analysis.
Okay.
And your $5,000 a month retainer, that includes all of the work with the legislation, whether it's you or other staff members or other costs? Okay.
Right.
That's
And normally under normal times, it would also include me coming down to the district and arranging meetings during the interim between you and the legislators in person. It's something BB&K is very supportive of. We put it under marketing. We cover the costs. It's a way to, you know, enhance your contacts with your legislature. Unfortunately, right now it's being done through Zoom, which is very convenient and very inexpensive, but I don't think it's as effective. But just FYI, if we ever get back into a normal world, for that amount of money at $5,000, the standard lobbying, that includes me coming down there at BB&K's expense. Now, if there's other things you want me to come down for, let's say you want me to come down for, you know, a board meeting. Okay, then you approve the expense for that, and I would submit, you know, a reimbursement. So it's
Nathan or Rob, did you guys have anything you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Good to meet you, Cyrus. Just following up on Kelly's question about, you know, the sort of most immediate, you know, next 2 weeks, really. It's not even a month. I mean, realistically, you know, what kind of influence? We really want to have influence when we have a lobbyist, right? Realistically, what can we accomplish? It seems to me not much in the very short term, but could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. And again, it's difficult for me to be precise. Ordinarily, I'd be able to give you a very precise answer. It's just these times are a little strange. Yeah. And so right now, you're asking me in this 2-week period where you don't know anything relevant unless you're personally involved. So it's kind of tough to ask, but let's just say hypothetically, you guys want me to target something like SB 902. As far as like opposition from cities, that's like the main one that cities appear to be opposed to and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm looking at
it. You might be surprised. Not all clients are equally weighted. For example, the previous COG I represented, Western Riverside, wonderful group of people, you know, I love them, but the reality is the majority of their representatives are Republicans. You guys happen to land in an area where there are key Democrats. So you guys have influence larger than your, I don't know you guys have outsized influence compared to your size, put it that way. Mm. So I can't just sit here and say, oh, you'd have X amount of influence, here's what we could do. All I can tell you is you shouldn't count yourself out, even at this hour. I already have a very close relationship with people like Henry Stern and Richard Bloom. And if, 5 cities out of this area come in and say, hey, here's what's going on, they listen.
Can you give us a couple of examples of where you've successfully lobbied and influenced, a decision for a city or a COG?
Oh, sure. Okay, my last thing was I got Palm Springs $10 million. That was a little earlier this year for housing. We also work on, if there are grant programs coming through, we will assist you with those. But
And
prior to that,
I'm sorry, is that included in the 5,000?
it can be. It depends upon the extent of the involvement. This was a fairly simple one-off. They just needed help with their application. I'm happy to provide that. If it's something more, if it actually falls into the bucket of grant writing services where I'm doing research and I'm having to meet, then we need to negotiate that, as to and size it to the size of the project or change the retainer. But if it's just, hey, you've got an online application, you just need help through the no, I do that for you. Just happy to help. So, let's see. It's a strange year. The last time I was personally involved in housing bills was just before COVID really kind of took over the thing, and we were still actively pursuing legislation. But I would say, what's my most, I weighed in on about a half a dozen bills, but I don't know how much I can take personal credit for killing a bill when there were, a lot of other people involved. League of Cities was involved, American Planning Association was involved. But up until, this thing got strange, I was active on at least 4 housing bills. I'd have to call up I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head right here. I'd have to call up my notes, but okay, AB 2580. I can remember that number that got held on. We got that one held on suspense after it moved, and that was. If you want this kind of detail, I could go look it up. But in this kind of a crazy year, I'd have to look at the details of what 2580 was. I remember writing a letter on it. I remember opposing it. And I remember it died. But now I can't recall the rest of the details of. I can't remember who the author was right now. I think it was. Might have been Wicks. Okay. Anyway, the best answer I can give you kind of on the call right now, I could give, if I did a little research and went back through my notes from earlier in the year, I could give you a slightly more comprehensive answer.
I have a sort of related question, Cyrus, is that, lobbyists generally have strengths, in one area or another, subject matter strength, or they have a particular strong relationship with legislators or agencies. What are your strengths as a lobbyist?
So good. That's a good question, because actually, every lobbyist kind of has to find their own niche to, be effective. There's 3,000 lobbyists running around Sacramento. So I'm an attorney, and I'm also a former Judiciary Committee consultant. So I do have a bit of a particular specialty or expertise when you encounter legislation that's legally very complex. And in point of fact, that bill I mentioned earlier, the privacy one that internet businesses opposed, one of the main reasons they sought me out was it was just a legally complex bill. It was seeking to overturn 3 Supreme Court decisions. So the legislation did. And they needed someone, and didn't have anybody prior to my joining, that could come in and say, here's the context of these court cases. Here's why the court went this way. It was actually they're actually protecting the public, and this bill undoes these protections. But until somebody could come along and kind of put this in a easy way to understand what is a complex legal argument, the bill appeared to be something different. So when you have an area that's legally complex and needs to be translated into talking points that a non-attorney legislator or staff can grasp, that is kind of something I am sought out for a little bit. In addition to that, I do work, I kind of focus on certain areas. So I have a strong emphasis in LA, and especially Northern LA, because I've represented Los Virgenes Municipal Water District and the Sanitation District for several years now. And then also down in Orange County, which is the new, by the way, the new up and coming place where Democrats are getting elected. So as a former Democratic staffer, I've been pretty active down there. So I'd say in those areas where you have like a need for a strong legal analysis and translation and somebody who can do a campaign around that, and also where you have legislators where LA legislators and Orange County legislators are clutch, I kind of have a bit of an in over other lobbyists. Now, in addition to that, BB&K has done something kind of exceptional, which is they started their own major donor program. So they make political contributions. Typically, clients or businesses make contributions, and lobbyists representing these clients go to fundraisers, are the ones seen by the legislator, and that's how they build their reputation. Well, BB&K realized there was a gap here because as they represent municipal interests, you guys can't make political contributions. So what BB&K did as a firm, they set up a major donor program. And so they have an amount of money every year. I make recommendations, and BB&K as a firm itself makes political contributions. So that's also kind of a, I don't really know anybody else who's doing that, who does political contributions that are really kind of tailored to the interest of municipalities and special districts.
It's interesting. I have one other question. I'll see if Nate probably has other questions as well. But you know, sometimes we feel sort of a little bit ignored. You know, we're small, relatively small cities, right, in the northern part of the county, and we write letters and stuff. But what would you do, you know, differently or creatively that would, you know, get people's attention when we're raising a concern about housing or 5G cell towers or whatever it might be that's, you know, trying to take local control away?
Perfect. You couldn't have teed that up any better when you said 5G cell towers. So BB&K recruited me away from Verizon, and largely because they were tired of losing. While I was the executive director for California for Verizon for 8 years. And during that time, I never lost a bill, including a small cell bill that I got through when it was a quirk bill. So fast forward, BB&K brings me on. They do another small cell bill, only now I'm on the other side. Now I'm representing municipalities. I pulled together a coalition, and we formed what's called a lobbying coalition. It's called Protect Our Local Streets, polls. And so I formed a coalition, just ad hoc, and we got 7 cities together to oppose this bill, and we got that bill vetoed. And it was specifically us. So what I would do, I do 2 things. I bring the lobbying model that I learned at Verizon, and I try to, as best as I can, bring that to cities. And the biggest way cities hobble themselves is their turnaround time on decision making. Very often, and I deployed this strategy at Verizon and they still use it, they do amendments faster than you guys can take positions. So you need to set up, I will advise you, and I'll advise you how to do it within the Brown Act and how to make it okay. What you can do in terms of policy principles that you would adopt that would empower Terry to say, okay, based on those amendments, here's what I believe our position is, and then you guys could review it later. But bottom line, in the meantime, I can get active. So the first thing I do for small cities and guys like you is get you on a program where your responses can be timely. Your biggest weakness is your responses aren't timely. Then after that, it's hard for me to say, oh, I'll do X, because what I do after 25 years is I tailor a campaign strategy when we're out to get something. And it's different every time. I talk to you guys, I find out what your interests are, and I work really hard with you to shape your message. Like, for one thing, in this conversation, we've already mentioned local control. Guess what? In our advocacy, you can say that to me all you like, and I understand it's an interest, but in your advocacy, if I'm working for you, I will never allow you to use the words local control. It's not persuasive. So I will work with you on making your message persuasive. And that's the second biggest failing that I've seen of local governments. You tend to speak in a way that isn't heard in the legislature. Because as soon as people leave local government, they may get elected saying, I love local government. Within an hour and 30 minutes of hitting Sacramento, they have forgotten all about local control. Because of course, now they want state control because they represent that state control. So now they want control. So we have to find a way to couch your message where we don't use the word local control, but we go past it and we say, if you defeat local control, here's the bad things that are going to happen. Here's why these people are going to hate you. And that's the message. So those two ways are the ways I've been pretty successful at helping small cities band together and be more effective than they otherwise would. And this happens at the administrative level too. Another project I just got done working on is 5 cities that were affected by Chrome 6 and the water. They felt that they had no influence, and they wanted to meet with every member of the state board, State Water Resources Control Board, including the chair. You know, it took me 3 months, but I eventually got them in front of every board member. But I got them together as a group, and I helped them work on their message. And so that's still in process, but hopefully hopefully they will have had an impact far beyond what any of them could have had individually.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey, Cyrus, I'm glad you hit on the policy guidelines. I think that's important. And full disclosure, we actually utilize 2 different lobbyists currently. One's more related to water quality, but and seeking certain funding, so it's more kind of specialized. But you know, mine's more about kind of to hit a little bit on Rob talked, just the timing of this all. What would you propose to do to get all 5 cities together? I think housing's kind of that first issue that we're really looking at.
Mm-hmm.
How would you propose to come in and get all 5 cities kind of on board quickly? Because I think although Westlake Village and Agoura Hills are very similar in some of our housing issues that we're dealing with, and some different, but I think across the board, we're all 5 are going to be different. So how would you propose to do that?
Well, this is where Terry would have to play a clutch role, because at this short time frame, there's not time to run around and work things through 5. But I would trust Terry to kind of know the interests of the members. And I could meet with Terry and say, look, okay, here's what's at issue with these bills. Here's who's for it. Here's who's against it. Here's what they're saying. Where do you think our COG is going to be? And then I'd have to present you with a position, and you guys could say, yeah, okay, we can adopt that position or not. But hopefully, if I've done my job with Terry, I've presented you with a position that we have every reason to believe will be acceptable. We might not be right. I mean, you know, this is the hard work of associations. My first gig, by the way, was California Medical Association, and no one gets along worse than doctors. And it's just the nature of an association. Associations are powerful because they have a broader representation. They have a broader constituency. They're less powerful because they have a hard time coming together and working cohesively. It's just the nature of the beast. You can deal with it through hard work. That's the only answer.
Just my final question, I think Rob hit on a lot of it, was just what do you see the involvement? I think with lobbying comes a little bit more face-to-face time, assuming, you know, at some point COVID, you know, we're back to meeting face-to-face. What kind of time commitment do you think, to be effective, that we should set the expectation for the elected officials that are going to be participating in this?
Okay. You know what? Anything is possible here. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to. You can give me a pat on the back and say, go get them. And I can do that. It is more effective, though, if I associate myself with you in a personal level and they see us together. So it's more like, you tell me how much I can have you. I will shape a plan that fits that. It could be 0. If you don't want to be involved, if you don't like it, don't do it. There's other people who do like it and enjoy it. So tell me who's involved. Tell me what my resources are, and then I'll give you a plan to fit that. And where our resources don't cover it, I'll handle it. But if you were to tell me, hey, Cyrus, you know what, I'm good. I can do 3 meetings a month. You know, I can free up a couple hours every couple of weeks. Assuming we get back to normal, yeah, I'm going to be down there at least once a month, setting up meetings, you know, because it benefits me too, by the way. I mean, it's mutually beneficial for them to see me with you and for me to be seen with another client. The more clients that I have that I can show, hey, I'm in your district to this extent. Like if I meet with, you guys bring me on and I meet with Henry Stern, it's like, hi, Henry, I've not only got your water district, but I've got, you know, a bunch of your cities in your district. Guess what? That's going to be a good meeting, you know, because I just carried that much more cachet with him. So I work that to the hilt, and it's you tell me how much I can have you.
Elise, if I could I ask a question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Cyrus, one of the things that you mentioned is setting up meetings with our area legislators, and I will say that, you know, we have a good relationship with our area legislators. I would say, especially with Henry, and you know, Bloom and Jackie Irwin, I would say about an equal. And Jesse Gabriel, since he has Hidden Hills and Calabasas, he's not as involved or engaged with us, but his chief of staff, Catherine Coddington, or district director, Catherine Coddington, who's also his legislative director, is very responsive. So from my standpoint, and obviously it's up to the board members, but from my standpoint, you spending time you know, arranging those kind of meetings and those kind of contacts, I'm not really sure if that's a productive use of your time. I guess that I would see more, you know, how you're going to interact with other legislators beyond our district that you could influence or advise us on how to try and influence, you know, the greater good.
Right. So what I've been talking about during this call that has been short term, it's hard to get influence for you outside of your district, like in the matter of weeks. That's kind of, you know, it's just not, I don't have a strategy for doing that. I do have a strategy for a long term. Long term, we use our resources within BB&K to align you. Like, let's say you're interested in, let's say Freddie Rodriguez, I pulled someone out on, you know, over there in area around Ontario. Let's just say he's on a clutch committee for you.
I know Freddie.
Yeah.
Personally.
Okay. Great. So he's a good example then. Let's say, you know, I know him for other reasons too. This would, you know, if he were to be aware that I'm now representing these 5 cities, that's another reason for me to reach out. And I'm already talking to him on other issues. So he is someone, by associating me with the COG, now I can have this influence even outside your district because of these other issues I'm working on. Beyond that, I've also done just coalition building within the BB&K world. Like, there could be other BB&K clients, even if they're not my legislative clients, that might be involved in the same issue as you. I can recruit them and use them as an entree to the legislator that represents their district. I've done that too. So I've got a few strategies for expanding your influence beyond your area, but those strategies take time. That's relationship building. I mean, if you hang around me long enough, pretty soon you're going to hear me say that lobbying is 2 years of relationship building for 15 minutes of lobbying.
Right.
And there's some truth to that. So short term, I can't expand your influence outside your area, but long term I can.
What about the possibility of, let's say the COG engaged you with a retainer for a month or two to see how this trial run or this engagement takes place, you know, before we get married, and maybe we want to do that for a month or two, and then we want to spend the fall kind of assessing, you know, how successful we were and kind of working on a bigger game plan, and maybe having a couple of meetings with you during that time when you're not on retainer, but that you would bill us for, or figure out some other way that works for both of us to try and work on a strategy that then we could implement and have like a full court press next legislative session after the first of the year.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I've done project work, but this isn't really a project. This
Right.
Sounds like something different. This sounds like a trial run period.
Well, I'm just saying that for us to enter into a retainer with you now with just 30 days or so left on the legislative session means that we would be spending for the rest of the year, you know, $25,000 and a majority of that would be spent on a retainer when the legislature is not in session.
Right.
So that the thing that I'm trying to get around is to, if we decide to enter into a relationship with you, that, you know, we're not spending a lot of money during downtime in the legislature, and look at it from an economical standpoint from the COG.
Yeah. What I would suggest, okay, let's think about this. During that downtime, that's when I do most of this relationship building work. During normal times, it's been a little strange this year, but during normal times, when the legislature's in session, I'm kind of glued. I have to be in Sacramento a lot. Not so much this last 3 months. We've been doing a lot through Zoom. It's been very convenient. But let's say hypothetically, it comes back to more in-person stuff. The interim period, those 3 months, that's the majority of the time that I'm coming down trying to do the relationship building for you guys in the district. Now, the thing is, the reason I'm noodling through this is that this year is a little strange. I don't know how much in-person work I can do, but we can, you know, we do the Zooms, which is, you know, convenient and inexpensive. And that's why there might be some possibilities here. Ordinarily, I'd say I need this time more than any other time of the year in order for you to expand your influence and, you know, build this up. This year, though, could be a little different. I guess I'd want to think this through. On the one hand, I don't want to invest a great deal of time, you know, building up your name ID and trying to expand your influence out of your area, and then have you guys go, well, thanks, but we've decided we don't want to have a lobbyist. It's like, now I've put in a bunch of like time and effort to build something for the future that's not being utilized. But on the other hand, we could do things. Tell you what, I think it's possible.
You're on mute, Elise. You're muted, Elise.
One of the things that you talked about, Cyrus, that we talked about as a priority for the COG was exactly that, with when we want to do a letter of support, by the time the COG talks about it, sends it back to each respective council, that the councils talk about it and then bring it back to the COG board, you know, the bill is long gone.
Right.
Or has already passed or whatever, has been amended. And so we talked about coming up with some sort of a legislative platform that all 5 cities could agree to, and that letters that fall within that category, those categories, would not have to go through this process of going to each full council. So I would think something like that might be work that could be done in the off season as well.
Yes, if you guys get principles in place and procedures in place so that I can get a turnaround in, say, 10 days, which is about what it takes. If you're going to keep up with your opponents, that's about what it takes to be able to turn around a position. Yeah, that'd be, you know what though? I don't necessarily need to be paid for that work though. That's, you know, that kind of organizing work and just talking with you and helping with your process, that's not necessarily lobbying. I don't need to I'll work with you on that just for the good of the order. In terms of, okay, I'm throwing ideas out at the top of my head because I hadn't considered this in advance, but one thing I should add, the contract that we would sign, it would have a 30-day out for you guys. It's like, if you're going through it and it's like, gosh, we just don't really get the value of this for us, for whatever considerations, 30 days you're out of the contract. So even if it's a year contract, you guys always have an out. Now, let's say for this year, what if we were to do something like, the contract is $5,000 between now and the end of the year. And there's this understanding that between now and the end of the year, we're going to work together to get you guys organized and get the word out that you have a lobbyist. And then starting next year, you know, starting January 1, we start a regular retainer, you know, $5,000 a month, 1-year contract. Would that, again, I'm thinking of this off the top of my head, but would that kind of help with your process?
Possibly. I mean, you know, we're looking at different ways to make this work.
Yeah.
So that's something we could take back to the COG.
Yeah. Now, assuming next year's back to normal, though, and we're doing in-person meetings, this, you know, the time that we're approaching to the interim next year, it's like, yeah, no, I need to be on retainer. That a lot of important work. In fact, some of the most important work for you, that's the relationship building part so that you can be effective later. That's when a lot of that work is done. This year, though, is so strange that, yeah, I'm thinking it's like, what could I do for you guys, you know, under these strange circumstances? So maybe something a little out of the ordinary is called for, you know, given these circumstances. And, you know, I'm happy to work with you guys, you know, to figure this out. We're in this for the long term. So it's not like if I make an additional $10,000 between now and the end of the year, it's really going to change anyone's life. So I think we can work something out here.
Okay, anybody else?
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Rob or Nate?
No, thank you. Good to
I
meet
got
you.
a question. Nate,
Uh-huh.
you really look familiar. We've crossed paths before.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple times.
Yeah. So where do I know you from?
Either.
Do you know? I mean, because I just
USD.
look at you now, and it's like you're really familiar.
I know we've crossed paths, probably league or something else before, but yeah.
How long have you been at Aurora Hills? How long have you been there?
About 14 years.
But he just became our city manager on July 1st. He was our assistant city manager.
Let me see. It's been, actually, that's going back far enough. Were you involved? Any chance you're involved when I was still working for Sheila? I left in 2004.
Yeah. Not here, but yeah, I was in city of Walnut on the other side of LA before.
Okay,
wasn't-
you know, nice to run into you again. I know we've crossed paths. You'll
Don't forget the name Hamburger, right? I mean, that's that's one sticks.
Cyrus, I have one more question.
Sure.
You know, because this is kind of new to me, but what are some of the issues that you foresee that our COG is mostly in the very high fire severity zone, and we're most of our cities are built out already or almost built out. And I'm just wondering what you think are some of the issues that the COG would be interested in, you know, having you represent us on.
Oh, funding and liability are the first two that comes to mind. So there's been this issue kicked around about potential liability for municipalities or special districts where, how to phrase this, where the response to a wildfire was not sufficiently robust, or because because of a maintenance issue on equipment, some firefighting effort wasn't successful. So there have been groups that have been trying to find ways to create new liability. There's also your relationship with your major power companies, with the PG&E, SDG&E, or SDE. I don't remember off the top of my head. Are you?
We are SCE.
SCE. Okay. That fight's not over. You know, more to come on that. A couple of bills have been done, but each bill was, okay, we're going to do this piece of it now, understanding that more is going to be worked on later. So the interplay of liability and blame for wildfires, especially when it's sparked by a power company, there's more work to be done there.
Okay.
And then my gosh, the last thing I worked on for a COG actually was the PACE program.
Yeah.
Anybody familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
You never know. I never know what issues are going to, you know, show up as a blip on your radar. As a COG, you can potentially cover quite a few issues, quite a span.
The PACE program, I don't think that didn't work out that well. I don't think it was great.
In some ways, it was an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
So there were some unintended consequences, and it got a really bad reputation. And
yeah.
If we're ever going to kind of resurrect the good that's still buried within it, it's going to take work.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Thank you, Cyrus. We will.
Thank you, Cyrus. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It was a fun call.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Rob.
I'll be in
Are
touch.
we all wait a minute. Are we all going? Let's
Okay, well, I'll go so you guys can decide.
Stay on. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Cyrus.
Bye.
Is he gone?
He's gone.
Okay, thanks, Terry. I'll just give you my 2 cents, and then, we can go around, I guess. Well, Elise, you're in charge. I'm sorry, I was taking over your role.
You can start.
So I'm not, I'm not convinced that like the short-term benefit of this for the next 30 days is really worth it. I mean, it's not a lot of money. I'm willing to try it if, Rob is in agreement with me, but I mean, if he's not, then I think he's not. I would definitely, I think the goal of, sorry, I have corona brain. I can't articulate. I used to be a lawyer where I could articulate what I was actually saying. No longer. Those days are gone.
We had a long night last night, so.
I know we did, but it just seems to happen every day now. I don't know what it is. So I believe that one of my goals for the COG, because I really like the COG, is, I would like to up our game. In other words, like I'd like to up our influence. And I think the goal of a lobbyist long-term is a really good goal. I really appreciate that, but but I'm not 100% sure that, the short-term use of this person is really worth it. I have a couple issues. We have some issues that we're going to have to work out with Malibu, who already has their own lobbyist. I think to Terry's point, in the short term, we have really good relationships with when I can call up Henry Stern and he answers the phone when I call, as he does for Terry and, and Elise and all of us. So I don't know. I would definitely also like to interview other lobbyists. I think he had a couple really good ideas. I really like the idea of the COG platform, building the COG platform, because that would make Terry's job, from a timing perspective and just administratively, so much more streamlined. I think that would really help. I think he had a couple good ideas. I'm not sure this is the guy, I didn't, I don't know. I know the firm really well, and I looked him up. He has a good reputation. I don't know. I didn't love him. But that's a personal thing. But I would like to interview, and that's neither here nor there. I'd like to interview a couple lobbyists. I'm not convinced, contrary to, a couple of our colleagues in Hidden Hills, I'm not convinced that this 30-day period is critical. And part of the reason for that is, we do have Ray Pearl on our city council, and he does, he's a housing guy, and he's telling me that there are no real killer housing bills that we should be concerned about as a city right now. There's some that are sort of marginal, but there's no really anything that rises to the level of SB 50 that he is particularly concerned about in his role as council member. Okay, I'm done now.
So I would say that, if money was not an object,
Yeah.
having a lobbyist as a COG is an awesome idea, because we can turn work over and have them carry the ball and help us get, funding or any of these things. One of the things that, one of the things that's pending right now is the concept that property in the very high fire severity zone, there's talk about exempting it on some of these bills, which is
critical. Yeah.
Which is critical. So in the short run, I kind of hate to see that, go away, because, that's going to take some work, because there's not a whole lot of cities who care about the very high severity zone. So that's what I would see in the short run, is just trying to, whatever push is going to be made there. And, once these housing bills pass, we may look back and say we were, penny wise and penny foolish. On the other hand, I would say it's all about dollars and cents to me. I think it makes sense, like it's a wonderful thing. If we had, if the 5 cities want to throw money into a long-term relationship with a lobbyist, because it probably is a good thing to do. But I do agree, and I'm glad you brought that point up, Terry. We're right now until 2022, when we may have new people representing us, we're in pretty good shape. But I have always felt that when people talk about, you know, oh, you don't need to worry in California, it's never going to go red. And it's like, well, I've seen California red. So you know, we don't know what's going to happen when electeds, you know, if the economy is down the toilet in California in 2024, who knows who's going to be our representatives, and we may be scrambling around to try and protect our industry. We may not be able to just pick up the phone and call Henry Stern, or he may be elsewhere. So, you know, I don't know. But I do think it's a good point for the short run. So I guess my view is it kind of depends, you know, how this is all going to go money wise, because it's expensive. You know, we've all
Not
just our budgets.
Not in the short term, though.
Right,
Yeah.
not in the short term, but
I mean, $5,000 is not a lot, but he didn't seem all that interested in like the trial run. You know, when Terry proposed that, he didn't seem to want to bite on that too much. So
yeah, I get that.
Although he did come back and say that he would be supportive of doing something, maybe 5,000 for the rest of the year. And then
yeah, that's true.
if
He
we
did.
started something
said
at the
that.
beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on several points, but having talked with him twice now, once on Monday for more of an extended period of time, I'm not really sure that he's the right guy either. And so I certainly would defer to the two of you as far as interviewing other people. The one thing that kind of he touched on and then it quickly left that I think that we could explore is Contract Cities. I think was the first group to do it, and I can't remember how long ago it was, but they formed a separate entity that raises money and contributes money to elected officials. And this is kind of an out of the box idea, but it might be possible for our COG to create that separate entity that, I mean, there's a lot of people in the COG cities that are, I would say, political players and contributors, or people that might contribute to the COG independent committee that would not only provide contributions to like Henry and the local people, but might expand to leadership or other things like that would get us a little bit more play. And I know that that's kind of a big jump, but while I was thinking about it, I just wanted to throw it out there.
Rob, Nathan?
Yeah, I don't think that we get that much by getting into an arrangement with this firm right now, just because I think the time it takes to sort of get organized and get all our ducks in a row, it'll all be over. So I'm not convinced that it's worth it there. That being said, the high fire severity zone and how that relates to housing, that's a big issue, and we can't let go of that regardless of whether we have a lobbyist or not. We need to track that and have a voice there, certainly. But I'm also convinced that, it's all about relationships, as he mentioned, and that's important, not only our relationship with the lobbyist, but how that lobbyist really interfaces with the legislation and how effective they are. I just, I wasn't really convinced that he was really the best fit and where his strengths were. And I think that I am convinced, however, though, that having a lobbyist for the COG is a good idea. I think it's sensible and a good investment. But I think we should take the time and take a look at a few different firms. That'd be my recommendation.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I agree with Rob on the timing. Having worked with the lobbyists for, in a couple cities over about 20 years, I mean, he's right in that it takes time to kind of get your platform built and some strategy. And so that does take a little bit of time, but I don't see any value in starting that relationship at this exact point in time. I think probably regrouping and then maybe even looking at some other options. Our lobbyist is probably more federal than it is probably strengths in state, but you know, I think it takes a certain personality and it's kind of, especially when you've got a group that you've got to bring together and get, you know, cohesive on a couple different bigger issues. So I think it would be worthwhile to speak to some other folks.
Okay.
Agreed.
And I have no problem with doing that. I'm still, you know, like I said, I think it's a great idea if the money is there. But I just don't know how, you know, housing is a big issue now. I'm sure there will always be issues, but the 5 cities have to agree.
Right.
Mhm.
Issues.
There's more detail that needs to be hashed
Yeah.
out between the 5 cities, because as we discussed on Tuesday, you know, for Westlake, who has no lobbyist,
Mhm.
I mean, we've used a lobbyist, you know, in past years, way past years before me. Then, you know, we're not anxious to, you know, pay the same share as Malibu. I mean, that's just not realistic for us. So I use Malibu as an example only because for me, Malibu's issues and interests are the most opposite of my cities, you know, so that's why I use that. So we would have to come up with some, you know, way to you know, it would have to be a creative way, whether it would be like Stuart said, per rata, you know, based on population, or I don't know, but there's a lot of issues that we would
Right.
have to work out. I think we need to talk about this again, you know, I mean, but I agree with Rob. I am on board with Rob. I believe that, you know, a long-term lobbyist for this COG is a great idea. You know, and you know, I take into account what Henry told us on Sunday, and that's that, you know, he just can't do this for us by himself. You know what I mean? Like his district is big, and you know, he's our buddy, and we like him, and you know, Jackie too, and they work very hard. They just can't do it alone. There's just too many people, you know. So I really took that advice seriously.
And I think we need to look at the issues
Yes. Mhm.
that 5 cities can agree on. So for example,
Right.
I'm here saying, oh, you know, no development in the very high fire severity zone. I don't know that Calabasas agrees with that.
Right. Exactly.
So if all of a sudden we don't agree, does that mean we're taking that off the table for the lobbyist?
Yes,
And
there's a lot of
what's
parameters. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not as simple as just saying, okay, we're going to split a lobbyist 5 ways. You know, it's
Right.
like, which, you know, so maybe, I mean, the possibility exists that, you know, on the long term, maybe it won't work for the COG, but I would definitely like to pursue it. You know, I think it's important. I mean,
Well, I think
obviously,
that-
strength in numbers is, you know, much better.
Yeah.
Right. And it would have been nice, you know, I mean, one can look back and say, if we had done this last year, then we'd be all ready to be fighting the 9 housing bills. So we don't know what's going to come down the pike that will impact all 5 cities, but, you know, we kind of need to get a feel for A, what would the issues be, and B, who's the best person for the job. So
Definitely like to interview more people.
yeah.
Okay.
And it sounds to me like what I'm hearing is that perhaps nobody really thinks that the short term, that we should be jumping into this because there's something pending right now.
Yeah, Terry, you're going to get a lot of opposition on our position on that from our friend in Hidden Hills,
Right.
as you know. So,
Right.
mhm.
I do know that. The one thing that I would say with, you know, I know that Malibu's got their own lobbyist,
Mhm.
and you know, they're spending a lot of money on that. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to say this in the meeting the other day, but I mean, they were spending a lot of money without getting any results.
Right.
They're trying to, you know, limit the group homes and the rehab and all of those things, and they're spending, you know, $150,000 a year,
Mhm.
and so far they haven't been able to get anybody to pull the trigger on those bills.
True. Yeah. That she said, Riva said they were spending $12,000 a month.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, we don't have $12,000 a month right now.
Right.
Rob will confirm that. We don't have that money, you know, so I'm
And-
sure. Yeah.
And
So-
that's why I've, you know, not just this year, but I've always, you know, tried to keep the COG lean
Yeah.
and mean as far as, you know, how much the cities pay. And,
True.
you know, a few years ago when, you know, I needed a salary increase, I was able to cobble together the metro money and some other things in order to support that without, you know, that going back to the cities. But obviously, if we were looking at a lobbyist, whichever one we go with, you know, there's going to be the cost incurred,
Yeah.
even if we agree on a legislative agenda.
Yeah, you're right, Terry. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, and the COG is lean and mean, you know, due to you. I mean, yes, look at that lean and mean face. Yes, I agree. And I mean, Elise said that, you know, I mean, the money is, you know, we don't have, I don't want to call a lobbyist a luxury, but we don't have money for luxuries now.
No,
and it's just, I mean.
I think it is to a certain extent right now,
Yeah.
a luxury.
Yes.
It's the primary issue. You know, and we have our constituents that we answer to, you know, once the ACORN gets word that, you know, we're going to pay a lobbyist. I mean, it's just something that, you know, might not be that well received. It's definitely something to consider. There's some complex issues here. It's not as simple as just going out and saying, oh yeah, we need a lobbyist, you know, I mean.
Right. And it's possible Malibu would not want to be part of it.
Yes,
so
that is possible.
COG, and so, you know, that's another whole issue. So where do you guys think we go from here? I mean, I guess we could be looking at others, you know, and I mean, I guess the first hump we have to get over, and I think there's going to probably be consensus, is that no one's going to feel a need other than Stuart that something needs to be done ASAP, like in the next week.
And
that's issue number one. Yeah.
And off the record, I think that Stuart would be comfortable with the direction that the two of you are going on this. I don't think
it's not Stuart. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's Stuart was. We were having a conversation the other day, and he was saying that he didn't think that, you know, a lot of the bills would really be that bad, the housing bills, and that would have that bad of an impact on Hidden Hills. And so he wasn't really, you know, trying to lead the charge on that. I think he was just responding.
Okay. And so, you know, I guess that's point number one. Point number two would be, you know, Terry, if you got recommendations of a couple of other, you know, people who, and, you know, Nate and Rob, you may know people that we can ask just to interview and see what else is out there and what the kind of ideas they have. And then we can, you know, bring back our thoughts to the full COG. Now, we don't have an August meeting, so unless we were going to pull together something, we would be waiting until the September meeting anyways.
Well, yeah. Yes, I mean, with Zoom, it's obviously easier to pull together a meeting if we need one, but that would be entirely, you know, up to you. And it doesn't sound like that. I mean, based upon what I'm hearing from the two of you, there's really no consensus. There's no need to push to hire a lobbyist for the short term. If we were going to do it, you would want to interview other people and then look at it more as a long term and figure out whatever that fee is, how it gets divided up equally, and the platform that everybody agrees on going in. You know, I have a gut feeling that if we put together a platform that said, you know, we're just going to deal with housing and, let's say, emergency fire disaster kind of issues, that we could probably have a consensus with the 5 cities. I think it would splinter off after that. And the final parting note I would say is the one thing that he did mention that would really, I think, be a benefit to the COG is, you know, every 5 years, I do a grant application to get us FEMA money to do a hazard mitigation plan. Those take a lot of time to put together, and the back and forth and everything else, but it does bring in money. It would be nice if we had a lobbyist or someone like that in Sacramento that could say, hey, you might be able to get money from this group right now, you know, why don't, or this agency, why don't you look into a grant, or at different times of the year, but I just don't have time to track all of that different stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the only other thing that I would ask you to do, Terry, if you're comfortable with it, is that you would individually report back to the other 3 members and just make sure that they're on board with, I mean, I don't want to violate a Brown Act in any way, but just make sure they're on board with not taking immediate action.
Oh, yeah, and I don't think that would be a violation of me just reporting back to them and saying that the 2 of you and the 2 city managers and I interviewed this lobbyist, and there's a consensus that we don't need to hire someone right now, that we need to put a little bit more thought into it, and that we also need to interview other lobbyists before we come to a decision.
I think that sounds fair.
Okay.
And then that way, you know, just in case the other 3 are like, well, you know, I really think we need to be moving quickly, then at least, you know, then we can reconvene and talk about it then.
I don't think that's going to be the other 3. I think that's going to be the 4th.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I got my marching orders. Thanks a lot.
All
Thank
right.
you, everybody.
Okay.
Have a good
Appreciate
day.
your time.
Good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.